So thank you so much for having me. I'm Lindsay Branham, and Andrew and I co-directed Call Me Priya. And I started a film company called Novo Films, which is where this film was produced from. And we specialize in creating community-based collaborative films that are used in specific settings globally in human rights emergencies or issues of human rights abuses in order to galvanize change from the ground up.
I'm Andrew Ellis. I'm a filmmaker. Lindsay and I have been working together for the last several years, and I specialize in bringing kind of cinematic imagery into places where it usually isn't found, and try to do so to generate some form of consciousness raising and peace building.
Okay, great, cool. And I'm Daniel. I'm one of the movie buffs, and that's Arpit, and this is the Movie Buff Show. So welcome, guys. I'm glad to have you here.
Happy to be here.
Thank you.
Basically, I love to ask this question in the beginning. I think the question is for both of you guys. What inspired you both to become a filmmaker, and can you tell us a bit about your journey so far?
Lindsay, you want to go first?
Okay, let's see. That's a big question. I studied journalism in undergrad, and my first job was working for a humanitarian organization in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And so I was stationed in the East, and I was covering kind of all the different ways that this organization was serving communities. And one particular story that I had found with a journalist friend of mine, Jonathan Olinger, who started a company now called Human, we started shadowing a group of former abducted children that were fighting with various rebel groups in the East. And through getting to know them and hearing their stories, it became really apparent to me that the people that needed to understand what they had been through were people in their own community, not necessarily people like me from countries far away, even though that's important and awareness raising is really an important part of change cycle. But when I'm sitting in front of a little boy and he can't go outside of his home because of the stigma and shame of what he had been through, I started wondering, how could storytelling be used in a more circular way that comes from the community and is for the community?
How about you, Andrew?
Well, I sort of inherited some photography equipment at a young age and became impassioned by just sort of the approach to the world that a still camera can give you. It became kind of like a spirituality for me, as like a way of seeing and engaging with the world. And then filmmaking became kind of like a social thing. Like it was a group of people as a teenager we were just making films constantly, and that led me to go to film school in New York, and where I was extremely focused on commercial cinematography. I just was obsessed with lighting and optics and camera movement and the tools and the teamwork, and sort of had like a very strict focus on that for 3 years until I had an opportunity to live abroad in Cuba, where I couldn't bring any, big equipment, any lights or anything like that, and just had an opportunity to just bring a small DSLR camera and began to see filmmaking as a way of engaging with the world and kind of being with people and being with people in strange circumstances, or circumstances that I viewed as strange at the time. And so I think that sort of split this, I feel like I kind of have this split journey where I sort of learned the tools of this trade, and then also learned that I guess like some sense that art could be used to connect with people and to reflect people's goodness back to them, and that's been the last like 13 years of my life trying to figure out how to stitch those two objectives or those two passions together.
Awesome. While I was just researching about both of you, I've come across to your films. So majority of the filmmakers, will try to make films that, can reach to the masses, and also that is very, in a way, easy to make, what we usually see. But both of you have decided to choose a path that, your subjects are mostly based on the social issues, and that is not restricted towards the one country, but the multiple country. So how did you guys decide that, as a storyteller, you want to choose this path?
I think, a life lived in community, in interconnectivity with all living beings has always been really important to me. And I would say it really is kind of like a spiritual path, but not in the sense of I have something to offer, give, or save at all. More, what is it to actually be in a co-creative process in which we're generating something together. And that's always been the motivation for me of where can I be a part of life, goodness, transformation, imagination, possibility, resilience. That's been like the core driver for me, actually less like the story piece, even though I love the storytelling component. And I started making like weird kind of movies as a teenager, but like more like mystical and lyrical, not really based on specific narratives. And this path, I think, probably ignited by, in undergrad, I was able to be a part of a investigative team. I interned at the New York Times when they had a documentary film department, and the investigative team I was working with did a big expose on the railroad industry, and the print component of that investigation actually won the Pulitzer Prize. That was 2005. And I was, just like a associate producer doing like very little things, but I got to see the amount of justice that was served for the families who had lost their loved ones at these railroad crossings that had then been covered up by the different railroad companies. So this opportunity to use storytelling as a means to help bring justice and relief to people, and seeing that happen in real time, was kind of the nexus moment, I guess, of why I wanted to go in this direction. But I was trained as a journalist, so it's also like my lens was always very much focused on what's happening right now in the world. How can storytelling augment people's not just understanding of what's happening, but I think I mentioned this idea of possibility. There's a researcher in peace building at Notre Dame University named Jean-Paul Lederach, and he just kind of coined this term, the moral imagination, which he's worked in peace building all around the world. And he's really seen that when communities can kind of begin to see what's possible, all of this momentum and energy goes towards that possibility. So I really see filmmaking not really about social issues. I see what we're doing as filmmaking for imagining what's possible. It's the moral imagination. So whether that's social issues or not social, it's all social issues. We're all part of this world. We're all living under situations that are difficult and easeful. And it's really been a gift to get to be a part of communities everywhere. I mean, I've learned more than I've given, certainly.
Awesome. What about you, Andrew?
I don't have anything quite as eloquent to say, but I certainly have just followed my heart in terms of this journey, and I think if I had to put on some kind of like retrospective mission statement, I guess, and sometimes I try to think about this to help me, is just that, like, I just love filmmaking. I just love the process, like the creativity, the problem solving. But the world, isn't just about me. And like it'd be fun to go out and just make Nike commercials and stuff, like, and just like live in a big house. Like, I think that would be really fun. But there are there are like, there is a real imbalance of wealth and opportunity in the world. And so I think I've always just tried to stay awake to that since I had my kind of like moment of realization when I was traveling, that poverty exists and that it's real and that it's not just like a headline in the news or something, that that like it's so I've just tried to be useful and do what I think is useful, and that does come, you know, it would just be easier to do other things. I guess I always try to hold the films or whatever project I'm working on kind of to the standard of like, you know, just like how easy it is to like they say that it costs like you know, $150 to save a child's life in like from malaria, you know, and so if I try to think about like film budgets and stuff and like how much money it costs to make a film, and is this film really worth like this many child's lives? And obviously like utilitarian morality isn't so like clear cut, like we need art in this world, but I try to hold the products I take on to like a standard that is like about human life.
So Andrew, you were just talking about the lights, you know, on your first question, that you said that once you were shooting somewhere where there was very less light. So I'd love to ask this question to you, you know, being a cinematographer, which light you are a fan of? You're more of a natural light kind of a guy, or you're more like a artificial light kind of a guy?
Oh, well, I mean, it's all about natural light. I think it's kind of fun to think about the tools of cinematography, but they pale in comparison to the, you know, the natural glory of light. It's and so I think that's kind of become like you know, just working with natural light is more about paying attention, because in a lot of situations it's all there for you, you know, and it's just about, are you able to open your eyes and see what is there. But sometimes if you're trying to do very specific things, like you need these kind of funny little light cannons that can, like, you know, that can augment certain areas, and but yeah, it's I think I'll forever just be like a student and lover of natural light.
Awesome. Daniel, you like to ask your question?
Sure. So I'll just hop into some background about Call Me Priya, and just, this is a wordy one, so I'm just gonna look at my questions. So Lindsay, I found your journalism experience pretty interesting, and just the fact that this isn't really a documentary, but it's fiction based on reality. So I'm curious, just what inspired you guys to choose that way of telling the story and challenging change with this film in a fictional way that is rooted in reality.
Thank you for that question. Kind of part of the, I would say, process of the way that we create these types of films is this docu-fiction hybrid. It's fiction in filmmaking process, but it's definitely documentary in heart and soul. And the reason being because our primary audience are communities affected by this issue. It helps protect the identities of people that have survived such difficult experiences as being in bonded labor or being abducted by a various rebel group. It keeps them anonymous, so we're not putting anyone at risk. So that's why, just like a premise, first line, why it's fiction. But in so doing, it's like so documentary in story. So the process of writing the script started with me conducting 60 qualitative interviews with girls in the midst of bonded labor on a kind of preliminary trip, took those transcripts, collaborated with our team, which was Andrew and I, as well as our Indian colleagues, and crafting a narrative that is really reflective of what's happening on the ground. So yes, there's filmmaking plot decisions that are, you know, in service of the story moving forward in a certain way. But the turns, let's say, like the big one, like Priya being able to kind of get herself out of this situation, that was like weeks of deliberation. How do we offer something hopeful to communities that's not too aspirational and impossible? Because young girls are going to be modeling their choices and decisions. Priya will become their hero, which she has in communities. She's now a household name in over 500 villages.
Really?
And yeah, so that's pretty incredible. And Priya has become a heroine. And obviously, it's, you know, we shot it in Tamil, in the language that these girls speak and live in every single day. And then the cast, they're mostly, our lead had actually been in bonded labor herself, Suganya. So she's playing a character, but she's pulling from her real life experience. So when I say this like docu-hybrid thing, it's, you know, these aren't actors we're pulling from, I mean, certainly not another country, but not even another state within India. This is a girl from a village whose life experience was very similar to Priya's. And with that, there's a lot of real delicacy. And I went through a drama therapy course, and then Andrew, you know, with his acting teaching background, we really craft something that's healing and generative for our cast, because this brings up a lot for them. This isn't just a story they're playing. This is a life that they're also living and challenges they're facing. So yeah, that's a bit of an answer.
Okay. Okay. Now you mentioned there's kind of like there would have been risks with doing a documentary, but are there risks for her being like starring in this film?
No, because she's,
Okay.
you know, fully out of that scenario. And yeah, we made sure that that wouldn't be the case for her.
There were some strange things that happened though when it came to like trying to film an anti-bonded labor film inside of a textile factory, and like the incentives there are like a little tenuous, and so somehow the team that we were working with like were able to navigate this very treacherous terrain of like finding the right mill that was actually treating people right, that was sort of like a well established above board place, because no one wants to like, you know, no one who works in that industry would want to throw shame onto that industry or people that they work with, and so it was that was a very complex, socially complex thing that I will never understand how they were able to pull that off. But it was like, it felt like a heist mission or something. Like it was like very tense for a few days. And the location we were able to get was like it was like still functional, but a little bit like dated, and it was, I mean, I was amazed that they were able to actually get that together. But that was one of the most complicated parts. I think that the people that everyone that was in the film that had some relationship to the industry, but was all, you know, everyone was vetted, their communities approved, everything was very like, had to go through these very intricate social approval processes. But the location was tricky, because yeah, it wasn't like like some of the places we scouted were kind of the places where you would do like a hidden camera kind of thing, like some investigative thing, and cameras off, and like, you know, what are you doing here? Like some of the places we scouted were like that, because everyone's trying to you know, cover their tracks, and so that was, yeah, the location was the most complicated, I think. I don't know if you had any disagree, Lindsay.
Yeah, I want to add one thing about that. One, I just want to name the organization that funded this is the Freedom Fund, implementing this program on the ground. So we were brought on to create the film, create the curriculum that the young girls watch over a period of 8 months. But they really deserve the credit, because it was their, you know, willingness to try this, as well as the Indian organizations on the ground that we worked with day after day in very close proximity and partnership to pull this off. So I
Peace, trust.
Yeah, peace, trust. Thank you to them. And I also really want to name that our Indian producer who worked for the Freedom Fund and was with us every single day on set actually passed away a year ago, and Jaleel Abdul, and he had a dream his whole life of being a filmmaker. He was involved in human rights and ending bonded labor his whole career. This was just such a really beautiful project, and he brought so much to it, from his spirit, his joy, his love, his heart and dedication, and then his necessary producing skills that made this even possible. So I just want to honor him and say thank you to him. And I know it's been just so difficult for his family since, but yeah.
Okay, that's lovely that he can kind of live through the film.
Yeah, he really does.
That's great. Now, can you talk about what it was like getting, like, how did the Freedom Fund approach you to do a project like this?
Yeah, and one other quick thought on the location. I just wanted to delineate that the site of bonded labor portrayed in the film is a spinning mill, because the Freedom Fund works primarily with young girls in the spinning mill. So that's the stage where girls are in a big factory and they're spinning cotton into thread. And we were not able to film in an active spinning mill for obvious reasons. So we filmed in an old cotton ginning mill. So that was why we were able to film in that location, because it wasn't actually a spinning mill, it was an old ginning mill with machines from like 1940 that were brought over after World War II, just these giant things that they were still using. So it's set in a place that is not fully what these young girls are in, but that was the closest we could get. Let's see, the Freedom Fund, I met the president of the Freedom Fund, Nick Grano, at a event, and we connected, and Novo had already done a few of these mobile cinema projects, just in other contexts. So in Northern DRC, Andrew and I had created a film called They Came at Night that was about formerly abducted children and people taken by the LRA safely coming home, so facilitating peaceful defection opportunities. And that had done really well, and kind of based on that and building on the momentum, I was just excited to pitch this idea to other nonprofits where I felt there could be an opportunity to use this same premise to reach their target program beneficiaries in this alternate way of using storytelling and curriculum to help achieve the outcomes that they were already working toward. So basically they took a risk in a way, because they had never done anything like this. You know, it's kind of unusual to fund a film that's this dual purpose, where it's created primarily for communities on the ground, but it's also excellent craft, and it's shown elsewhere and can help galvanize attention and awareness around the issue, as well as highlight their organization.
Okay, great. Now, you had mentioned that Priya's kind of become something like a hero, and that it's kind of like it's used as a curriculum. So can you talk about that? And like, have you gotten a lot of reactions from people who have watched this film and used it as a curriculum?
Yeah, so the film, primarily, we wanted to help girls that are currently in bonded labor grow their resilience, their self-esteem, and their ability to get themselves out of that scenario if a safe opportunity arose. So there were a lot of different kind of like fingers out of that hand, let's say, that include like how to communicate with your parents, you know, information on menstrual health, what is the actual working minimum wage for this type of job? What are your worker rights? So there's a lot that comes out of that was embedded in this curriculum. So each kind of scene or a section of the film was then put into the curriculum that had a variety of exercises and a whole thing. And then this was printed. I trained an initial group of Indian facilitators who then trained other trainers. And the project then was rolled out by the Freedom Fund in over 500 villages for a year, with reaching over 10,000 girls. So that's why this, Priya has become a household name, because they were with Priya every week, talking about the movie, working through these exercises over the period of a year. And then the Freedom Fund did a really thorough impact evaluation and a slavery prevalence study as well. And then they did a follow-up project where they used SMS from Priya to girls living in these villages to kind of reinforce messages from the film and encourage them to report, incidences or talk to their parents if they needed, or a variety of different things. So that's also why Priya's name became so ubiquitous.
Okay, fantastic. Cool. Arpit, did you want to go in with yours?
Sure.
Okay.
So, I love to know this thing, because while I was just seeing the films that you people have made, that, it's the story from around the world, that definitely does not belong to your region, in a way that you belong to a different country. So how do you come across to such stories? I love to know that.
How do we, I just want to make sure I understand the question. Like, how do we find those specific stories when they're not from near where we live?
Yeah.
In terms, do you mean specifically in terms of like how we get specific in a given project, or how we even become aware of the issues at large?
I think both things, because I think in a way, maybe if you are reading about the world news and everything, you might will get to know about the subject. But let's say we'll take an example of Call Me Priya. So I mean, the country belongs to a different world altogether, and you get to know of a story of this one lady sitting in one state who has done something like this. So how do you come across to such stories? That's something I would love to know.
Yeah. Well, I think on the first part, the kind of macro level, I can speak to, and I think Lindsay, you should follow up with this like specific of how you actually researched the project. But I think we both sort of just naturally have a disposition of wanting to inform our imagination, by, like, you can, I don't know, I sort of feel like it's like my duty to shine light like into the dark corners of my brain that are like not, like, if I'm not aware that there is an issue with bonded labor in in southern India, that's just because I'm ignorant, ignorant, like, because I haven't read about it. And it's like reading or watching a film or traveling. Suddenly it's like if you've traveled somewhere, if you've traveled to some other state or some other country, and like you hear about it in the news, you suddenly care about it. It's like you have this relationship to it, and the big storm that hits that area suddenly feels like, oh, like I want to know about it, because you are aware. If you hadn't read about it, or you've never traveled there, or you don't have a relative living there, it feels like nothing. And so I've sort of observed that phenomenon. Like, I'm like interested in that. I've been interested in that phenomenon, that it's like, I don't think the heart really has a limit on how many things it can care about. But I think it is limited to the things that it knows about and is aware of. Like, we can have a general feeling of empathy, but it's like, I feel like our process at large is about like kind of bringing like these issues, to our doorstep, into our family. And because if Priya was your sister, you would, go out and have all this energy for doing something about it. And I think it's just about, trying to, and I think there's an endless amount of energy available if your heart is connected. So I think, we just try to read and stay tuned to what's going on. And it's like, there's just no excuse now, like there's just I can watch, local journalists from that area at any time I'd like, so there's really there's no reason, except like my own desire for comfort and laziness. But but anyways, Lindsay, you want to talk a little bit more about how you prepared for us to screenwrite this?
Yeah, and I think I would also mention, with any of this, there's definitely a real risk and reality of colonization and continuing to colonize places that we're not from just by virtue of being white storytellers from a privileged country and coming in and thinking maybe we know something that we really don't. And I have been really conscious of and active as a company in trying to put into place real decolonization frameworks, both of my own mind as a creator, but then institutionally, and it's not perfect at all. But I just want to name that's a real blind spot because of the privilege and the body that I live in. And with that, stories can be another extraction from the developing world and just something that's taken and then used and communities don't see the benefit of. And I think that's why I really love this premise of storytelling mobile cinema, because the primary reason we're doing it is for the community. It feels like a really good, important correction to that other issue. At the same time, I'm not from that country. I don't speak that language. And so there's a real necessity for cultural humility, meaning not just like I'm wanting to learn about this other, which still is an otherization, but what does it mean to even defer decision making to people that are actually from there? And then when it comes to like the filmmaking team, that can be a real challenge, and it's something that we've really navigated. So in our last project that we did together in Northern Congo, we brought on a director, Patrick Kenkalala, who's Congolese, and he was an associate director working really closely with us on the project as a way of, we're trying to build in not just, we work with people in country as crew, but as creative talent who is deciding what the story looks like and feels like. It's like, it's not just who the story is for, but how it's told, who's telling it. There's so many layers. And I think in light of the last few years, especially, there needs to be real, deference and deferral of power in the storytelling process. So, okay, all that is like my back kind of premise to my next thought, which is, it's just a lot of research and really spending time listening to communities. So for this particular project, Freedom Fund found us, but then there was several months of really listening, and I did those qualitative interviews with 60 girls, and then spending time really with those transcripts. What are these girls experiencing in their own words? Then taking that, pulling themes from that, then taking those themes and kind of considering, okay, how could that be shaped into a narrative that is this 3-act structure and moves people in certain ways and is a great film. And I think that's where Andrew and I have always had like a great tension and working relationship, because I'm going to be the one that's like, but like this part of the research, and he's like, yeah, but this is going to not be good for a story. So I think together that creates a really nice symbiosis of merging, because no one also just wants to watch a linear story about something really difficult. We can access that every day by pulling up the news. We're trying to do something different, and again, pulling at that like moral imagination piece. So I think there's something real as well to compassion fatigue or overwhelm. We're exposed to more information than we've ever had at any other time in human history. Is everyone responsible to do something about everything? No, obviously not. But if we're alive today, like there absolutely is a responsibility to use life, time, energy in a way that is beneficial for as many humans and more than human, the earth as well, so that we all have a chance thriving as much as possible.
You know, while you both were just answering that question, one thing that just came in my mind, you know, that if I just have to sum up what you just said in one line, that I think I probably will say that doing right is a long process.
Yeah.
I'll try to sum up with this line.
Yeah, I like that. It is. Yeah, and it takes a lot of checks and balances. So it's not just us going over there and coming up with the story, but taking the time to vet it through all these different local organizations, take their notes. This isn't accurate. Okay, what is, you know, that takes time. And yeah, you can go in and steamroll people, but that's not the way we want to work.
Yeah, sure. You know, I like to talk about this one specific scene from Call Me Priya, that when she gets a paycheck, she goes to the family, gives the money, and the money is less than what they have expected. And he just tell his father that what I can do if the owner just fools me. And the mother, and he says, mother, say something to the father, I can't do the overtime. The father immediately suggests that you do the overtime. And the mother say, what can I do about it? And then specifically Priya says that for you, I'm just a machine, you know. And then cut to that scene, we see his brother is playing, you know, cut to that frame. So in a way, were you guys trying to showing gender inequality by that particular scene?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was like a very just the expectations of the daughter versus the son. Yes, I mean, it was absolutely. It wasn't like this family against this evil shop owner. The sort of the expectations put onto this girl were within her family, and the bias of how she should behave and what she should listen to. That was something that we saw in the interviews that we conducted, and that was something that seemed to really resonate with Suganya and our local creative team. That it wasn't just like an external power source, but that it was something that was learned within the family, and so that seemed like a really important like pressure to include in the film. That we didn't want to trivialize the risk that it would take for her to disobey her employer, because it wasn't just about, oh, she's going to lose this job. It's she's going to disobey her parents and their expectation of her, and that I think that was something that we really had to learn in the process. That it like for us in the States, it's like very easy to say, oh yeah, like self-empowerment, but it's like the family structures and expectations and the consequence of disobeying those are very real risks, and we had to kind of learn that a little bit in the process, because to us, leaving that job maybe didn't, if it were, me or Lindsay in that job here in the States, if it were Lindsay, it wouldn't have the same weight. So, but in that situation, to like go against the family and go against the employer is like the biggest thing, like the biggest risk. So, yeah.
And I would just add that this came up in the interviews, and it's just true that Tamil Nadu has a really high rate of suicide amongst young girls. And there is a real fear for young girls to be honest with their parents about the abuse that they experience, because there's a lot of shame. They don't want their parents to feel bad that they're in a working scenario that has put them through quite a bit of suffering. And so interview after interview, girls would tell me, oh, I can never tell my mom that. I could never tell my father that. I I would rather harm myself than tell the truth about my life. And that is such an enormous pressure. And it's because there's still this expectation that young girls, you know, no, they're not going to have the same opportunities of being able to go off and be doctors, lawyers, whatever they want. There's still a real gender inequality there. And the result is girls would rather take their own life in order to maintain that structure of inequality.
Yeah, and while I was just watching that scene, that's the only thing I could interpret. My focus was not on that the parents are have a huge expectation from a girl, but my focus just went on that, and I found it very unique and smart. Like, you have not used any dialogues to portray the gender inequality. You just have used the shot. So I think for me, it was very smart and unique. I love to ask you this one specific question, that filmmaking is something, or any job in the world, will require some sort of encouragement, some sort of celebration, that whatever work you are doing, you need the praise for it to keep going. While many filmmakers, who make the big mainstream films that sometimes get widely celebrated, but people like you, who is working towards certain moments, or working towards some motto, they often do not get equals celebrated. So how do you, as a filmmaker, keep yourself motivated towards the work that you are doing? And from where do you always get that encouragement that let's do this again?
Very sweet question. Wow, I think I have to think about that, actually. I mean, it's like when we're working for, I mean, I think part of the expectation in doing vocational filmmaking is that the change that we're striving for is not something we're going to see. And I think there's a quiet joy that comes from that, like India's, in the midst of like a total revolution, becoming like a technological superpower, like the gender tensions, that the way that things are evolving in that country is going to change, and your country is going to change drastically over the upcoming decades and century. And I don't have any illusions that we're just, this film is a little drop in the bucket of hopefully shifting momentum in the right direction. But yeah, I mean, it can be fatiguing when you feel like no one's listening. I think it's a combination, like getting feedback. Like, while I think as a filmmaker, like, when you're young, like, you feel like, oh, I want to be Steven Spielberg, and like that's kind of the pinnacle of like what success looks like. But I think that these projects, like, while they're not intended to speak to the whole world, it's like you're speaking to a specific group of people, and you're like singing their song, and your goal is not to have box office numbers. Your goal is to help people thrive and save people's lives. And so I think the feedback, while it might not be like millions of dollars in my bank account, it's like when we hear that, this SMS campaign is like encouraging young women, and that the film has been screened and well received in all these various villages. Like, I don't know, there's gratification, I think, in in sort of the quiet, like unspoken successes. They're not even unspoken, they're just not sort of tabulated with the same metric. And so I think, yeah, that's sort of the way I look at it.
And Andrew, in a way, the work that you do, so me and Daniel were talking to one of the cinematographers a few days back, and while we were just talking to her, I asked her this question, that can you just describe what cinematography is? Because I'm pretty sure not many general audience will know what cinematography is. And I asked her this one question that, that not many people even will understand your work, your contribution, and maybe they will not even going to celebrate your work. So I think you as a filmmaker also have chosen those subject, and I think as what profession as a cinematographer that you're having, that speaks about that. So that's why specifically I wanted to ask you that question, that because I think you are the right person to ask that question.
Thank you.
Yeah. How about you, Lisa?
Yeah.
I guess I would say like a couple moments. And these types of moments have happened in the various projects. But after the film, after we made Call Me Priya, and I went back to train the facilitators who would be taking this film to communities, there was one afternoon, and Suganya, who had played the lead of the film, came, and a couple of the other actors from the film came, and we had like a celebration, and we had tea and we had cake, and some of the Indian facilitators who would be bringing this film started talking about how they had been in bonded labor when they were young, and how them getting to now bring this film to communities felt like the biggest gift. I mean, they had tears in their eyes. So I'm sitting there and I'm realizing, wow, we're part of something so big, and it's not just a film. These are people's lives, and there's so much beauty that I'll never even be able to kind of contain and put in a bottle. But getting to share that tea, share that cake, know that the process of being in this project with us was life-giving for the people that were in it, that's enough. But then on top of that, part of the project and the curriculum, the young girls every week would write in a journal, a little kind of like reflection of what they learned that week. And at the very end, they were invited to write a letter to Priya. And I got to read them all. Well, some of them, they were translated into English. I got to read some of them. And these letters were just the most touching. Young girls saying, Priya, you're my hero. I want to be just like you. I had no idea a girl could be so powerful. I had no idea that a girl could, make their own future possible. Thank you for showing me. I love you. I love you, Priya. Just so heartfelt and beautiful. And to me, that is it. That is it. And on top of that, we have the fun of making this project, and that's beautiful. But that keeps me going for sure. And it feels like, it fills my heart so much.
So, Lindsay, I'd love to ask you this question: that how do you feel when someone describes you as a woman filmmaker?
Like, how do I feel about being a woman?
Not really, but let's say if I just have to say Andrew, I'll just say him as a director. But maybe if I have to put you, I might say a woman director.
Yeah, well, I guess I don't think it's necessary to add the gender in front of that. I mean, obviously there's less women filmmakers than there are men, and there's real disparity within the filmmaking industry and less opportunities. But I would say there's even less opportunities for those from the BIPOC community than me. So I think, I mean, I don't know, filmmaking is still definitely dominated by men, and in terms of like who makes the decisions often. And I think it's also, I would say, kind of maybe a patriarchal model, just in the sense of it's really demanding, and the kind of, I don't want to, when I say these, it's more about energetic. So, masculine energetics of like, we have to get things done, and then a feminine energetic of like, let's like be a little bit more like soft and flowy about things, is kind of hard to put into a set shoot scenario. And I have felt that tension. And I don't think that's just because I'm a woman. I think any person in a body experiences those energetics. So
I think storyteller is storyteller. Why to put a gender in it?
yeah, it's not necessary. I mean, I get that sometimes people, and there's like funds and like opportunities for women filmmakers to try to change that disparity, but I think it's kind of like highlighting I mean, marginalized group almost makes it worse instead of just we're all equal. That being said, I mean, there needs to be great effort made to bring on board BIPOC filmmakers and giving opportunities, because and it's too easy to just say, oh, I don't know them. We have to find them.
Sure. Daniel, you like to jump in with your question?
Yeah, sure. I feel like it was a while ago, but we were talking about, we keep referencing the interviews that you did, Lindsay. So, and I felt like when in your conversation, when you were talking about how they were comfortable enough sharing with you their experiences and not their parents, I thought that was interesting. So, and it sounds like a very emotional experience with those 60 interviews. So can you just talk about that aspect and what that was like?
Sure, yeah. So myself and then two colleagues from the Freedom Fund, we were on the ground in Dindable area for a week. So it took a week to do these 60 interviews. And they happened mostly, some were one-on-one and then some were in small groups. So maybe like three young girls at a time and me and a translator. And it's very delicate work. And I am trained in trauma-informed psychological care. So I'm also really careful in how those interviews are conducted. So I don't just ask about, what's the hardest thing you've ever been through. There needs to be a lot of consideration around how those conversations unfold, because I could be opening up areas in someone that they aren't supported to digest and metabolize. And it could actually make their mental health more precarious because of that conversation. So there's really like a soft dance in how to conduct those and know when to pull back, when to be silent, when to allow them to lead. So it's a balance, and I'm just really aware of that, because there's also a power differential here. They are sitting with me as a person from the United States and probably feel some kind of implicit pressure to tell me things or answer my questions, and I don't want that.
Okay, interesting. And also, what was it like for you? You guys were also talking about just filming in a different language. So what are some challenges with that and just filming in a language that you don't know as well?
Go ahead.
It's huge. Literacy is a big deal when you're filming in a place that you've got this written script, but some of your actors can't read. And so that even just like with literacy comes like a whole set of, just how you understand the world and how you can interact with others. And so like sometimes the cultural barrier when you're trying to say this is the order of the script, and then your local team is saying like, okay, this is what a script is, and this is like how the flow of ideas goes, and this amazing actor that has the capacity in their personality to deliver just like doesn't understand like what a script is. That gap could really make or break our potential, or really just slow down the process. But I think the other challenge was that it was very hard to keep the film from becoming like a film by committee, like directed by committee, when you're trying to translate back and forth, because your translator is certainly like has their opinions of like how they thought the scene went, or how what you are trying to say to the actor, and their bias of like, oh no, this line should be funny, and you're trying to say no, this should be serious, but the translator kind of wants it to be funny. You know, that was a big challenge, and then just the time, like, because it's not like we're directing the film for how it feels in English to a Western audience. It's like that doesn't matter at all. It was kind of like it was just like directing the scene and then constantly like checking with a bunch of people of how it felt, and trying to understand their biases of what they are secretly hoping the film to be, and trying to interpret it through that lens. But it's not, let's just simply put, it's just not a precise operation. Precision was not like our top quality. And then like a lot of times we would get into the edit and be really close with the scene, and it turns out that thing we thought they said something completely different. And because we would have to, you know, verify the translation at different stages of the edit, and so sometimes there were some very rotten surprises that we thought they were just saying one thing specifically that was scripted, and they completely went off script, and we didn't know. So just knowing how to like work with trying to just get like a cold translation quickly without it becoming a community effort was like a huge part of the process. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, because of that, then every scene we would have someone dedicated to telling us after someone delivered their line, did they actually deliver the line? Was that accurate? And, you know, then they would have to say, no, they didn't. And then we would be frustrated because let's say like the acting was beautiful in that scene, but now the line was wrong, but we aren't able to hear that. So it's kind of a crazy process, but the beautiful thing I would say is that it really forced Andrew and I to, we can only look at body language really, and the subtlety of like what we're feeling from the energy that's happening in the scene, less what's being said. And I think that made us better filmmakers.
Okay. Now, what was the weirdest surprise that you guys got in the editing room with a wrong translation?
It's been a little while. I don't remember specifically. I'm trying to
that's
remember.
fair.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
Do you remember? I mean, it's happened a few times, but I don't. Does one come to mind for you, Lindsay, that was specific?
No, it was like
it's
3
been-
years ago now.
It's been a little while.
Oh, good.
But yeah, I also do remember, though, I forgot specifically like one specific part of our workflow was like the idea of the script supervisor became kind of like, usually a script supervisor is someone who's just, you know, just like making sure that continuity is held and that like they're saying the same thing, but here the script supervisor was like, literally, are they saying anything close to the right words? And so that person was like a full-time job, like with headphones, always just like, you know, in the bushes with the script, just like, you know, just sometimes being like, they didn't say anything that was like remotely the same that we all agreed on. And that was Jaleel, and who was constantly, you know, herding sheep, and that was a huge job. And then sometimes there would be debates over what was actually said, and but yeah, so it comes with its fair share of humor.
Yeah, this wasn't so much in the editing room, but the dinner scene took us like 5 times longer to film than it should have. Do you remember? Because the little boy could not say his lines, and that was just it was challenging. That was challenging.
Okay. That's all great. Now, are you guys okay if we just ask one wrap-up question each? Okay.
Sure.
Thank you for being generous with your time. I really felt like in the credits, I felt like the line "one girl at a time" really kind of defined the film. So can you talk about that aspect and like picking that phrasing for it? Or just what it meant to you guys, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for noticing that. I think that really does sum up the heart of it from I mean, this is about a singular girl who has changed her circumstances and gotten herself freedom, and we so want this film to communicate that possibility to girls one at a time, and change happens one at a time. And it feels like a really clear metaphor that it starts with one, but so much is possible. And we believe in that big picture possibility, and the Freedom Fund certainly does too. And they're wanting to end modern day slavery with their partners. So it's Priya at the center, but radiating hopefully to thousands and thousands of others.
Cool. Arpit, did you want to jump in with yours?
I forgot I have muted.
All
So
good.
for this particular question, I might have to look at my screen. So I'm just looking at my screen. So your company, Lindsay, Nova Films mission statement says that inspiring imaginative solution to seamlessly in more able challenge. And Andrew, your website says that filmmaker for the peace and poetry. How did you guys come up with that?
I guess I feel like peace is, it's tricky to come up with like one tagline that can sum up my MO, but I feel like for me it does come down to like celebrating life and reality, and at the same time trying to restore it and take action and improve the way we are. And so they're to it's like it's kind of a paradox in a way, but I because it's to celebrate something as it is, versus to improve something as it is, like our antithetical ideas. But I think there's a time and a place for each, and these kinds of projects like are ones where I think that I hope that the two are going hand in hand, celebrating the beauty of life and in all its forms, and then while also trying to help improve it.
Let's see. I think it really links to what I had mentioned around the moral imagination. And this last year, really in the whole pandemic, I've been spending, I mean, my whole career really took a shift, right? But have not been able to go back to India, for example, but I've been spending so much time in the more than human world with nature. And I think I'm really learning how to be a student of what is possible by looking at the earth, by looking at the cycles of the natural world. And so we are in a time where we're inundated with climate collapse, with social upheaval, with inequality, with vaccine apartheid. I mean, name it, we're in the middle of it, right? So I think I really ask myself, like, where do I want to put my energy? And I want to put my energy towards practicing how to imagine the impossible, because that flowers, why do we get the turning of the leaves? Why do we get millions of biodiversity, different types of species? Like, this is unbelievable. 9 billion cells in a human body. I mean, talk about like impossibility. So I guess the mission of the company is really like an ethos that I'm still learning how to practice, which is to see what's beyond and galvanize and be with others to believe in that possibility and move in that direction together. Because the fact that there's even human goodness and kindness, and after a year and a half of what we've all been through with this pandemic, for example, like that is worth. That's the seed that we're planting in the ground, right? And collectively. So I just want to thank you both, because when you talk about celebrating, I mean, this has been really lovely. So thank you for your questions, and thank you for honoring us as filmmakers doing unusual kinds of films. And I just really appreciate that. And so thank you for seeing the value of this type of impossible filmmaking.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm glad Arpit found it. Andrew and Lindsay, thank you both for chatting with us about Call Me Priya and your other projects. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for your time, Daniel and Arpit. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.